Okay, this is entitled Immigration. We're going to start talking about how immigrants came to the United States. And one of the things that we need to focus on is first, the Europeans flooding into the United States. Now, by the 1900s, Eastern and Southern Europeans made up more than half of all immigrants coming into the United States. Of the 14 million immigrants who arrived between 1860 and 1900, many were European Jews. Okay, so also coming in, you have America. The reasons why they would come is America offered immigrants employment. Okay, you had very few immigration restrictions. They could avoid military service. We offered religious freedom in the United States, and more importantly, you had a chance to move up the social ladder. Most immigrants often took the difficult trip to America in steerage, which was the least expensive accommodation on a steamship. And oftentimes, they'd be like down below in the below decks, okay? So this would be a 14-day trip that would usually end at Ellis Island, which was a small island just outside in New York Harbor, okay? Often one of the first things that immigrants would see would be the Statue of Liberty during this time because it was newly erected as a gift from France. Ellis Island served as a processing center for most immigrants arriving on the East Coast after 1892. You usually passed through the island in one day. Oftentimes, when you did this, you had to. They would give you an exam, try to make sure you weren't a criminal, and then they would get your information. Okay. However, if you didn't meet the standards, some people would face the possibility of being separated from their family and possibly sent back to Europe due to health problems. Most immigrants, they settled in cities. The primary city where they would have settled would have been New York. Okay, they often lived in separated neighborhoods by ethnic group. And here they duplicated many of the comforts of their homelands, including language and religion. Okay, immigrants who learned English adapted to the American culture usually had more marketable skills or money, or if they settled among members of their own ethnic group, tended to adjust well to living in the United States. Okay. Europeans weren't the only ones coming to the United States at this time. Many would come from Asia. They had a severe unemployment at the time in China. Poverty and famine were taking place. And you had the discovery of gold in California. So that all led to it. You had the Taiping Rebellion in China. You had a demand for railroad workers in the United States, which led to an increase in Chinese immigration to the United States in the mid-1800s. Western cities, Chinese immigrants worked as laborers and skilled tradesmen and merchants. And lots of time were the first place they would see, whereas New York had Ellis Island, the West had Angel Island, which was in San Francisco. A lot of the Chinese there opened their own laundries. Okay, so between 1900 and 1908, large numbers of Japanese migrated to the United States as Japan began to build an industrial economy and an empire. In 1910, a barracks was opened on Angel Island in California, which as I referred to it earlier. And here is where a lot of the Asian immigrants, during this time period, most of the young men and boys would wait, sometimes for months, as a result of their immigration hearings. Okay, one consequence of increased immigration at this time was the resurgence of nativism. And if you remember, nativism was an extreme dislike for foreigners by native-born people and the desire to limit this immigration. So early in the 1840s, 1850s, nativism was directed toward the Irish at the time of the potato famine. In the early 1900s, it was the Asian, Jews, and Eastern Europeans that were the focus of nativism. The nativism led to forming of two anti-immigrant groups. You had the American Protective Association, which was founded in 1887. The party's founder was Henry Bowers, who disliked Catholicism. He wanted to stop Catholic immigration. In the 1870s, Dennis Carney, an Irish immigrant, organized the Workmen's Party of California. This group wanted to stop the Chinese immigration. And as a result, you could imagine, you're going to have racial violence, which is going to result. Okay, so in 1892, Congress passes the Chinese Exclusion Act that barred Chinese immigration for 10 years and prevented the Chinese that were already in America from becoming citizens. This act was renewed by Congress in 1892 and made permanent in 1902, and was not repealed until 1943. Okay, so that concludes our topic of immigration. We will talk a little bit more about it in class, ever so briefly, so make sure you watch this, and be sure to take your Edmodo quiz regarding the YouTube notes that you have right here. Thank you.